What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the ALLiN Podcast. As always, brought to you by our good friends at FitAid, Cured Nutrition, iN3 Formulations, and First Form. Today's a special episode for me. The very first coach I ever hired and brought on staff to iN3, Ms. Brandy Wann herself, is here with us talking reverse dieting. Now, full transparency, I had every intention of strictly talking about reverse dieting with her, the process, the ups, the downs, the pitfalls, the benefits. But as we kept talking, the recurring theme was really the art of coaching and something that I think Brandy has mastered. And so for any of you up and coming coaches, any of you potential coaches, or for any of you looking for a coach and knowing what to look for inside of that coach, listen up, pay attention, because Brandy truly is a master at this. She's a phenomenal resource to so many people. She has personally created thousands of transformations at this point, and she's just an all-around amazing human being. So I know you're going to enjoy it. Listen up. We'll talk to you next week. One more final reminder before we get into today's episode. For those of you that did not pick it up yet, I don't know why, the Macros Applied bundle is out. That is the ebook, the audio book, and Macros Applied Live, the exclusive seminar I did for a very select group of people, all available at macrosapplied.com. See you there. So nobody knows this, and I try to talk about it as much as I possibly can, but you are what I consider to be the reason that iN3 has built to where it is today. And I'm actually really happy that you're on the podcast because there's a lot of listeners on this podcast. We get a pretty good amount of downloads, and I get to publicly acknowledge that. So first and foremost, before we do anything today, I want to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I tell people sometimes that you always say that, and I think you're being a little generous, but it's so nice to hear.
It's true. Not many people know the story that when I was in my 20s, I had a pretty successful personal training. I say business, it's probably better classified as a job. But I had a lot of clients, and I was working a lot of hours, and I got some advice that I should have other trainers train my clients, and I should, really turn it into a business. And so I kind of tried to do that overnight, but these people had bought me. So when I tried to turn them over, they were like, I'm out. And I basically lost the equivalent of $150,000 pretty much overnight.
Oh, man.
And so what people don't realize is bringing you in and actually sending people to you right away was a very scary proposition. But I can obviously sit here today, 4 years later, and say it was the single best decision I've ever made. And one of the coolest things has just been to watch you flourish and watch you grow and create an identity. And I could go on and on about just how happy it makes me, but it's been a fantastic journey. And so I'm grateful that we get to use this platform today that I get to use it to express my thanks, but that we get to use it to just to share some more knowledge with people.
Yeah, thanks. Well, and it hasn't been talked about a whole lot before, but I mentioned it briefly recently in a post talking about my job history. But when I hired you as my nutrition coach, I was making no money because I had just sold my CrossFit gym 6 months prior, and I was so burnt out. And so I was taking a break. So we were stretched pretty thin financially, my husband and I, but luckily he's very supportive. And I felt like I needed to just try it for myself to really see if this whole macro thing was really, all it seemed cracked up to be. And so of course it proved to be a good investment because here we are, now. But yeah,
turned into be an investment on several levels.
Yeah, kind of interesting how the universe put us together.
For sure. Well, one of the areas where you have always excelled with people on what I want to talk about most today is, reverse diets. And so there's a stigma, I think, around reverse diets in that it's gotta get your calories up, and that it's this very just myopic pursuit of purely getting your calories up. So why do you feel like in 4 years of nutrition coaching, this has really become an area of expertise or something that you really find yourself working in at a very high level?
Well, I mean, most people, myself included, have a history of starting diets and either getting to a goal and then going back to our normal eating, or never getting to that goal and hitting that point where we can't take it anymore. So we, dive headfirst into that pizza and those donuts and all of that. And then, my personal history is more in the super clean eating world, and then cheat day so hard on Saturday, sometimes rolling into Sunday. So, but really what it comes down to is chronically not eating enough and then having those spikes of way overeating. And a lot of us just think that the answer is more exercise and less food. And then we get ourselves into a really bad place. And once you've been there everyone's different, but for a certain amount of time, it's like, it doesn't matter. You could reduce your calories down to like practically nothing and be working out every single day and not losing weight and probably gaining weight. And that just leaves for so much frustration and confusion.
100%. And so
yeah.
In theory, the premise of reverse dieting is relatively simple. It's like eat more, restore metabolic function, the end.
Right.
I think that a lot of people look at it as eat more to lose weight. And yet that's often what is reported in the media is like, you're not eating enough. You need to eat more to lose weight, which is scientifically completely wrong. Like being in a calorie deficit is rule number one to lose weight. So like, why do you think so many people just undereat? And why do you think we're seeing the need for so many reverse diets today?
I think it comes from a really good place, like be in a deficit, right? Yeah. Eat less. Working out is good for you. So working out even more must be better. Being on a diet is how you lose weight. So taking that diet to the furthest extreme possible must be the best way. But really it's not. It's about finding that sweet spot, which of course is different for everyone. But, we like to think in extremes and we're so used to getting everything immediately. And when it comes to diet, body composition, performance in the gym, it doesn't happen immediately. It takes a long time and a lot of work, so I think it's just a lot of misinformation or things put into practice with good intentions, but that don't go well. And also, we end up working with a lot of people who have had nutrition coaches. So they trusted somebody, and unfortunately that person may have got them good results temporarily, but didn't properly teach them how to get out of that. And so then, they come to us kind of in this state of not knowing what to do because they dieted down, were pretty happy with how their body looked, but it was not sustainable. And they just kind of slowly watched it like unravel and, lose all their progress.
That's a big one that's not ever discussed. I think so many people look at, metabolic adaptation or like the need for reverse dieting purely from, hey, I fucked myself up dieting. Very few people look at it as what's needed after a successful diet. So many people associate it with like a negative thing. Like, I don't think that needing to get your calories up is always a negative thing. But like you said, people do come to us having worked with other coaches and basically having, them saying, hey, I got you to where you want to be. See you later. And I think that's like, as a coach, it's one of the worst things you can possibly do. Like, we know fundamentally every dose of stress or every situation of stress is going to need a situation of recovery. And diets are stressful, like physically, emotionally. So I was hoping we could break reverse diets down two ways, right? Like I think that let's talk about the physical need, like what's actually happening in the body. And then I also want to go into the mental aspect, because this is where I think that you have built a level of expertise that very few people can match and very few people understand. And it's also why I think you've been so successful. So let's kind of start with the facts first and like the physiology. Like when somebody has gone down to, let's just say 1,000 calories, it seems to be like a common number. Why are they no longer losing weight, and why do they actually need to eat more?
Our bodies are designed to keep us alive in times of famine and in times of, food being plentiful like it is for us now. However, when we take ourselves down to ridiculously low calories, like 1,000 calories a day, our body perceives that it's starving. And to keep us alive, it slows down its metabolic function. Your energy is going to be lower because it's basically running on as little as possible to keep you alive, and it's storing as much as it possibly can because it doesn't know how long this famine or this starvation, period is going to last. So back in the olden days when we didn't have refrigerators and grocery stores, that was very useful. Our bodies were definitely taking care of us, but most of us don't deal with that type of stuff anymore. We're doing things intentionally to try to look a little better, be happy with, in a bathing suit and all that. But our body sees it very differently. Our body sees it as, I'm about to die. And if I don't get more food, that's what's going to happen. So what I have to do is slow everything down. Hormonal function, metabolism, energy, sleep even becomes hard when you're not eating enough.
Now, there's a lot of people that are going to listen to this that maybe haven't tracked their macros yet. So what would be some signs that they're not eating enough?
I think, bad sleep, if that's not something that typically is a problem for you, waking up in the middle of the night feeling like crazy hungry, that's a good sign. But even just poor sleep quality, there can be lots of reasons, obviously, why your sleep might not be so great. But if you can kind of rule out things like, oh, I just had a baby, or stuff like that, where
wait, you mean that's not normal? Like,
so brain fog, like if your job requires you to like be able to like fire on all cylinders and all of a sudden you can't make decisions as quickly as you usually do, or you like forget stuff that's pretty well, easily rattled off that by heart, that's also a good sign that you're not eating enough. Like there's a reason why your brain's having a hard time functioning. It's because it doesn't have enough fuel to work. So
let's now like put ourselves in the scenario of somebody that's not eating enough, and this has to be the scariest situation for any quote unquote dieter out there. They come to iN3, they get assigned Coach Brandy, and she says to them, hey, listen, like the reason you're not losing weight is you're not eating enough. What happens at that point? Because fundamentally, I know, obviously I've coached enough individuals in my life, the freak out that is getting ready to happen, and the lack of trust that is just inherent. Like it's not anybody's fault, but like what does that process look like, and why have you been so successful with getting people to do it? Because I mean, we have 15 coaches on the staff, and you excel so much in this, and you create such a good level of compliance. How have you been able to do that?
It's really hard. Reverse dieting is so hard. Back up. Dieting is also very hard.
Yes,
right?
It is.
Not eating as much as you really want to and making those sacrifices is very hard. But when you're seeing the changes on the scale and you're seeing the changes in your body, it kind of makes it worth it, right? You can keep going. And you also know that like the end is near, hopefully you know that, right? But even just seeing the progress on the scale keeps you going. There's that motivation, right? No matter how hard it gets, sometimes that's your driving force.
Yeah, I mean, it's like running a marathon. Like every mile checkpoint is just a little bit closer.
Yeah. So with reverse dieting, that's not always the case, which makes it extremely hard. Reverse dieting is very challenging. And so that's where the communication with my clients is so important, understanding where they are. We all know it's not just about the macros, right? If that were the case, we would just give people a set of macros they'd pay one time and that would be it.
Right.
But there's so much more to it than that. So we, understanding where they are mentally, letting them know that like, I understand this is a hard process, explaining to them why this is needed at this point in time and how it's going to help them be more successful with dieting in the future. And I also think that sometimes, even though that's not why they're coming to us, they're kind of relieved to know that like, they don't have to suffer on 1,000 calories a day, on no carbs, on 20 grams of fat a day, or whatever crazy thing that they've done in the past.
That's a really good point. Do you think that some people that do come to us under eating, they know that they're just looking for some validation there?
Yeah, like it's scary, right? Because the last thing someone wants is to gain weight when their goal is to lose weight or to lean out. And a lot of times in the reverse dieting process, that is necessary.
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that. When you reverse diet, what should somebody be expecting?
So, there's basically 3 things that can happen. And a lot of people are going to experience all 3 of them at some point in time in the reverse diet. And, one is what we call the hyper responder, where we start feeding them more, they start losing weight, which is awesome. And
makes us look really good, right?
Yeah, that's such a great way to start. It makes me look really good at my job, and it makes compliance, of course, very easy, right? Oh my gosh, I'm eating more, I'm losing weight, and that's awesome. And that will usually run its course for a period of time, and then you'll kind of see just things kind of level out. We continue to feed more, weight kind of just holds steady, things stay the same. And this is purely just talking from the body weight standpoint, none of the other factors that go into this. But, weight stays steady. We continue to push calories up, up, up. And at that point, it's pretty good. Like most clients are like, okay, yes, my long-term goal is I really do want to lose weight. However, this is pretty cool that I'm eating more and I'm not gaining. Like that just blows their mind, because everybody knows that the more you eat, the more you weigh. Right?
Yes, in theory.
Everybody knows that. Like that is fact, of course. And then, and then eventually at some point, and for some people this kind of happens right out the gate, is we start increasing food, even in a small amount, and their body is just so not equipped to handle it. They start gaining weight right off the bat, or at some point in the process. Their body doesn't really know how to use that extra food yet, is really untrusting of what you're doing to it because of what's happened in the past. So it just kind of stores everything. It just holds on to everything you give it. And that's definitely the hardest part about the reverse diet process is, communicating with the clients that this is normal. It's okay. It's temporary, even though it feels like forever in the moment.
So you're the queen of creating compliance inside of these reverse diets. And I think that at this point, we could sit here and we could educate and be like, this is how you reverse diet. Obviously the magic lives in the application, which is why I think your book is so good. I think that the book that you wrote creates a lot of expectations and how to navigate those. But let's just say that somebody you're working with, it fits that, or they fit that final description where they start to gain weight after week 1 and they hired you thinking, I'm going to lose fat. Like, what is it that you do that enables them to create compliance? And I ask because there's probably people that are listening to this right now who need to eat more weight or need to eat more food. They might gain some weight and they're trying to figure out, how can I mentally be okay with this?
Yeah, it's really hard. So for some of my clients, I will approach the subject and kind of convince them to just not use the scale temporarily so that we can focus on everything else. Because whether you're losing weight or working for performance or whatever, when you step on that scale in the morning, it can totally change the course of your day. You might wake up feeling fairly good, kind of look in the mirror in the bathroom and feel like, yeah, it's okay. And you get on the scale and it's up a pound and you're like, no, the world is ending, right? It totally just takes away everything else. So sometimes it's a talk about the scale. Also, it's just telling them again, like, this is part of the process. This is why it's necessary. And then one of the most important pieces is to put that part kind of on the back burner and start talking about the positives that are happening. Most often you're going to see sleep quality improve, energy levels improve, workouts get better, so many things improve. And even though the number one thing that they are most focused on is the scale, I have to show them that these other things matter even more, and especially right now. And, that's where a lot of it comes in. And then even if at first they're kind of like, well, they don't fully trust me yet, right? Or they don't fully believe it. But
yeah, that's a good point. How do you create that trust?
They don't, we don't know each other personally, like me and whoever my client is. They've seen some things, or maybe through a initial call, they were paired up with me. I think Brandy would be the best fit for you, and here's why. That's all they know, you know? And they check out my Instagram and see that I love dogs, so that's it. But, really, I am able to empathize with people. I've been through reverse dieting with you before. I know what it's like. I've experienced all 3 phases of the reverse diet, and, kind of just getting on their level and listening, just letting them vent. They just need to be able to have an outlet to say, this is hard. I'm uncomfortable. These are all the reasons why I don't like this, and a lot of times just like getting it out and then having me tell them that I understand, I know it's hard, trust me, I want your results for you just as bad as you do.
Well, and also we may mention you went through this process, obviously you were very fortunate. You didn't gain weight in the reverse diet. Do you think that
I did gain weight at the end.
Yeah, but you didn't gain a ton, especially in the beginning.
Right.
And by that point you had you had a lot of education. Do you think that you having gone through it personally helps you connect with your clients a little bit better?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Just like if you, let's use CrossFit as an example. If you've never done CrossFit before, but you've only heard about it, you can't really make a fair assessment about it until you've done it. So
it's like the first time I heard of Fran, I was at a gym that was half Globo, half CrossFit.
Yeah.
And the CrossFitters were like, "Oh, you got to come over and do this workout with us on Saturday." And I'm like, "Okay, like what is it?" I'm like, "Cause I can't do any of that crazy like gymnastic shit."
Yeah.
No, it's just like a barbell and a pull up. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's easy."
Yeah.
And they're like, they told me, and of course I do it. And I got took me 7.5 minutes. I got Fran cough for the next 5 days. And I'm like, okay, I now have that appreciation and respect. So I do believe that fundamentally having a coach that understanding something is one thing, applying it is another thing, but then having experienced it yourself is really something that allows you to build a connection that it's priceless in my opinion.
Yeah. And another thing that I'm able to do most of the time during the reverse diet process is to kind of break down a lot of the barriers of food rules. And, a lot of people eat really low calorie also because they have this kind of list of foods that they think is the healthiest and the okay. And then everything else is going to kill you essentially. And that's one of the things that you really helped me learn is that it didn't have to be squeaky clean until cheat day, that there was room, for that balance and for a little bit of everything. And don't get me wrong, I stress food quality. All of us coaches stress food quality as the foundation. But a lot of the clients that I get come more from a background of overly restricting, not just total calories, but certain foods as well. So that's one of the things I also like about the reverse diet process is I will remember one of my clients was so excited to be able to eat a bagel in the morning, and I have other clients who are excited to be able to eat an entire sweet potato with their dinner instead of a little bit of a sweet potato. You know what I mean? So and I never push anybody to eat something they're not comfortable with. And you never did that with me either. But as numbers get higher, as you start to trust the process more and get more comfortable with it, maybe you're like, ooh, maybe I'm going to have a sandwich for lunch. Maybe I'm brave enough to eat some bread or, maybe I'm going to have some ice cream after dinner. And you kind of learn that when you eat something in an appropriate serving instead of a cheat day serving, most of the time you don't feel totally ready.
You mean a scoop of ice cream is not the same as a whole pint?
Yeah, right? Yeah. So, that was huge for me. And I really like being able to teach my clients that because just all of the kind of stigma around good foods and bad foods. Yes, certain foods are healthier for you. But the long-term success comes from being more inclusive with your food and not having to be so afraid of what happens when you're at some work meeting and the only option is pizza and sub sandwiches. What do you do? So 100%. That helps a lot too.
Yeah. And so one of the questions I get asked all the time when it comes to reverse diets is, well, how long does it take? And so how do you handle that question? Because clearly we know there's no definitive time. How do you handle that question from a client?
Yeah, I just kind of let them know that we're just getting started, or if it's someone who we've dieted down and then now they're reversing. I think in some ways that's a little bit easier because they already understand kind of the first part of the process. And we talk about it along the way that after the diet comes the next phase of the reverse diet. But with a new client, it's just explaining to them here's kind of your history that you've shown me, that you've told me about, right? With the initial information that we gather. So you have been doing this, whatever this is, for a very long time, and we're working on fixing it, but it's going to take also a very long time to fix. And of course, some people respond better than others and faster than others. And that's what gets also really hard with people in the comparison game is they are well, I see so-and-so on Instagram who's reverse dieting and they've lost 10 pounds and they've PR'd on all their lifts and I've gained 15 pounds and why? So that's what's really hard. And I always tell them in that scenario, I tell them too, I said, well, no one's posting their failures on Instagram. So that's why you always see the hyper responders on Instagram that are eating more and
You
losing
need to
weight.
tell me that the people that are gaining weight are not blowing Instagram up.
Yeah,
about
they're
it.
not saying, check me out. I'm 20 pounds heavier.
Today,
and
I mean, I think that you're right. And I think that, you know, the point is extremely valid. Although I will say, I think there's this culture of people starting to talk about recovery.
Yeah, it definitely is, which I love seeing. The like, let's be real.
Yeah, I do too. I think far too many people try to sweep it under the rug for far too long. And I think the influencers, or, you know, those of us that are fortunate enough to coach others in this space, I think we have this responsibility to talk about the bad just as much as we talk about the good, because if we lead people to believe that it's all sunshine and roses and that it's all going to be easy, like, we're doing them a disservice. I mean, I personally, like, I've asked myself several times, if I was like extremely metabolically adapted and I had to go through a phase where I could potentially gain 10, 15, 20 pounds, like, I don't know if I could mentally handle it. Now, mind you, I have a background in eating disorder, but even still, it mentally scares the living shit out of me. So let's talk about the process, right? We talk about the fact that it can't be defined relative to duration, but what does the process actually look like? We talk about eating more, but give me some nuts and bolts.
So like when they first start, you know, they're going to send us over a history questionnaire and their food logs, which is super important to know where their current eating is. And whether you're trying to diet or reverse diet or whatever, this is why formulas cannot be trusted fully, because if you're eating, you know, 1,200 calories a day and not losing weight, I am not going to pull calories from you. That is going to be not a good thing for your overall health. So somebody else might to get you those quick results. I'm not going to do that. Also, a formula might say maintenance for you is 1,800 calories, but you've been eating 1,200 calories for 6+ months, and maintenance for you is not 1,800 calories. Maintenance for you is 1,200 calories or maybe less.
Yep.
You know, so those can be used as a guide and a goal of like, that's what I tell my clients. I say, ideally, I'm thinking right now, I'd like to see us get you to X amount of calories. So when they ask for a timeline, that's also really helpful is, you know, I say your macros today equal 1,500 calories. I would really like to see us get closer to 1,900 before we start thinking about a diet. However, I don't live or die by those numbers. So
that 1,900 comes as what, like an estimated maintenance point, or?
Yeah, it's kind of like an estimated maintenance point based on, you know, I personally have found a simplified formula that you talk about of using like body weight times 14.
Yep.
Or like if they're severely overweight, like a lean body mass guess. Yeah, of like a good indicator of, you know, a good kind of maintenance-ish point. Doesn't work for everybody, but at least gives us something to work towards.
Really simple targets, really at least understand.
Yeah. And I go off of biofeedback trumps everything. So I have clients who eat like body weight times 20 and we're having a hard time keeping them not losing weight. You know what I mean? And I have men and women in that category. And then you have other people that, like we, you know, talked about, maintenance is not body weight times 14 for them because their bodies have been, you know, and it's not just their food, it's their lifestyle. They're working too much, working out too much, like running their kids all around town all day long. They have no time for themselves. Just stress just takes over. And if you think that stuff doesn't matter and doesn't manifest itself physically on your body, you are wrong. You know?
It definitely does. I mean, we know that what we see physically and what we present physiologically, I would argue stress and like any form of stress, you know, acute stress, eustress, distress is like, it's the combination of all of those things that really will yield where we end up. I mean, everything we do is a stressor, just from being awake too long to caffeinating to eating the wrong foods to training. Like even training, well-controlled training is still an intentionally imposed stressor. Like,
and I have some clients that, you know, sometimes it starts from day one and sometimes it's something I work towards of getting them to cut back a little bit on their workout volume.
And how is that received? Because now you're telling somebody that they need to eat more and you're telling them they have to do less inside of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really hard. And so that's why I said sometimes it's from day one and sometimes it's something I work towards, and just kind of based off gut response, you know, of reading their story and talking to them. And sometimes I even tell them like, now I want you to start thinking about taking, you know, an extra day off or not doing that double day on Thursdays. because I'm going to be asking you to do that down the road, but we're not going to start there. So I kind of like get the wheels spinning, and also that can give them a chance to like respond and kind of gauge their emotional response to me just even bringing up the idea of working out less, and what that's like, because
I imagine it's got to be a difficult line to tread, because like, let's talk about that as a coach. Like, all the reverse dieting stuff aside, you're a phenomenal coach, and we know as coaches what is optimal. And then I think we also know what a client is willing to do. And how do you find that middle ground?
I mean, I've overtrained. Most of us have been there. So that definitely helps, is to know what it's like when you really get to that deep, dark place, and how, I mean, my own personal story was it took me over a year to climb out of that black hole once I got there. And it is not a place that you want to end up. Nope. But also a lot of the time, it's not a place that you can warn somebody about and they'll actually listen to you. They have to kind of experience it for themselves, because you're like, whatever, I'm fine. What do you mean? I mean, I take Sundays off,
I go to the class with my friends every day.
Yeah. But the workout is way too fun. I can't miss it. I have to do my Oli lifting, and I have to do the WOD, and I have this competition coming up, whatever, all these things. I have been there. So speaking from experience also helps. And then helping them understand, like, certain clients, there's also different ones. Certain clients have, the tendency to work out just purely as a means to burn extra calories. They're that old like cardio mindset of calories in, calories out. That's one beast. And that is a hard beast to tackle. The other beast is like, training is so fun and I enjoy it so much, or I have these competitive goals that I can't get behind, because if I take a day off, 5 other people are going to pass me up, and that's hard too. So it is hard. Again, there's trust there. It's hard to get someone to believe you that by working out less, they can actually do better in the gym, and talking about.
And how do you create that belief? Because I agree. I think that, and we have case study after case study of people that have been successful with it, yet people don't want to believe that they want to think they're the exception, not the rule. Yeah. So how do you facilitate that trust?
And I just ask them if they'd be willing to take one day off, if they don't take a day off at all, or their active recovery day is like definitely still a workout. I'll ask them to just walk instead on that day, or just do housework and lay around, like nothing that looks like exercise. And if I can get them to trust me enough to at least do it once, then we talk about, how was it? How did you feel that day? How did you sleep that night? How did your workout feel the next day and the day after that? And here's kind of a funny side story. I have one client who we have correlated that one of the reasons why she has a hard time going poop regularly is because she works out too much. She takes a rest day and she poops.
Wow. So her gut is so overstressed from her training that she can't even go to the bathroom.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just one particular client that we've kind of, and she's actually even the one who made the correlation and told me about it. And I was like, well, there you go. I mean, I don't know how much more clear you could be as to why you need a rest day. If you're constipated and bloated, that is not comfortable.
No, nobody wants
nobody wants that.
And, I mean, who would have known? It could be so easy to go to the bathroom, like no mag citrate, like no enemas. Let's just not train for a day.
Let's just not train. So it comes down to just explaining. And I also use examples of myself, other clients, because I think that can help too, because a lot of the times, our clients, they kind of feel like they're all alone in this. Yes, they have us to talk to and they see all the highlight reel on social media, but if they're not responding as favorably, they feel like something's wrong with them. And how come this is happening to me? And I'm like the only person who's not losing weight on this protocol, or who's really struggling here. And, so again, the empathy and just being down to earth with them, letting them know that like, it's normal. And like, and again, reminding them that like, I know it's not fun. It's definitely not sexy. This is what's needed right now. But then again, focusing on all the positives that you can bring up. They might not even recognize them. They are going to either over the phone tell you or send you their email check-in, and they're listing like 5 to 6 positives and they don't even see it. And so then I have to bring it full circle to them, because all they're thinking about is the scale didn't change, or the scale's up a half a pound this week, or whatever. So reminding them of all the good helps them keep going and helps them stick with it. And I think it's also important to mention that, we talked before about how like I will tell them sometimes this is kind of the calorie amount I have in mind for you. We don't always get there. I have clients who get to a point mentally where I know they can't handle it anymore. And we have to hit the pause button, and that's okay. Some people who diet don't hit their goal the first time around either, and I think people kind of forget that.
It's interesting. Like what you just said is you'll intentionally abandon what you know to be the right strategy relative to making sure a client is in a good place emotionally. That is like, to me, that's the epitome of why you're a good coach. And I think that, too many coaches live purely in the tactics of what quote unquote works versus how a person works, right? I think if we can make a person work, any protocol will work, like any well-designed protocol. But I think the real magic in a good coach is making somebody work. And you just hit the nail on the head. I think that, this process is relatively simple, right? You start with an increase, you eat more, you get to maintenance. Let's talk about this though. Like we gave a couple scenarios, right? There's those hyper responders that lose weight. They're great. There's the people that don't gain weight, but they're eating more. They love it. And then there's the people that gain weight. They hate it. All three examples have to, at some point, want to actively create fat loss. So when we hit the peak of our reverse, what next? Because I know from personal experience, some people see immediate success, but let's be real, not everybody. And how do you handle that scenario?
I give them all the information up front. I say, all right, so we finished this phase, or I feel we've reached a point where we need to take a break from this phase. And so we are going to, sometimes I just kind of like back off slightly with my clients and we just kind of like, that's really like hitting the pause button. But if I'm saying, okay, you know what, we're going to take a break from here. We're going to try to take you into a deficit, or we have totally pushed our calories up higher than I even thought we would. We're definitely in a good place to start a diet, right? I let them know right out the gate, like your expectation is going to be to lose weight within the first 1 to 2 weeks because we've pulled calories. You're doing everything right. So of course, that's what you expect to see happen. But I just want to warn you that it might take 4 to 6 weeks before you see that happen, even with you doing everything 100% right. So again, it's one of those things like nobody really wants to hear that. However, by being honest and upfront with them from the get-go, if they do lose weight before that, bonus, right? Then that's awesome.
Then you just look even better.
Yeah. And then, that's great for them. But if they don't, then at least they know that it's common for this to be happening. I always tell them, like, it takes a little bit of time for your body to kind of like catch up and figure out to what we're doing to it. Yep. I see this happen to myself, and I use this example of clients. Like when I go on vacation and I'm, eating much more freely and definitely indulging more and eating out more and all of that, I actually feel pretty okay until like a week or two after I get home.
Then you realize the damage you did.
Whoa, what happened? Like it's like this delayed effect. And not everybody has that, but my body seems to be a little delayed with that kind of stuff. And
I always feel good until I have to come home and go back to work. And I'm like, wow, I fucked myself up. Like my brain fog is real.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just laying out all of, here's what to expect. These are the expectations for you, and just letting them know that that's normal. That helps a ton. I also just want to bring up that I do have, some clients that gain weight, but it's not bad. Like I've had a female gain 10 pounds, all her same clothes still fit. By looking at a photo of her, you would never know the scale was up 10 pounds. Like her body was just like, it's like, it just was ready to put on muscle.
And some of that's glycogen too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So not all weight gain is bad, even though we perceive all weight gain as bad, unless if someone is actively trying to gain weight, like in a strength building phase.
100%.
So sometimes, people are kind of surprised. If they were just looking at the scale, they'd be really defeated. And then they send me their photos and I'm like, look at you, like your waist is smaller, your butt is firmer, like everything's improved. The scale's up. Who cares? The scale's up,
Well, to my knowledge, nobody ever, I always tell this to like my female clients, like to my knowledge, I've never seen a male try to pick a female up at a bar by saying like, hey, it looks like you weigh 2 pounds less. Like, right. He typically goes up and says like, hey, you look great. Can I buy you a drink?
Yeah.
So it's, it never was about the scale number and unless it's a weight cut scenario, the scale really is just doesn't matter. I want to pivot away from reverse dieting. I know that's like the big topic, and
Yeah.
but I've made mention so many times that, you really are a fantastic coach. And I think as we've discussed reverse dieting, we see how critical having accountability and having the right leadership is inside of this phase. Why do you think inside of 4 years, you've become one of the most sought after coaches in the space? Like, you've really created a level of success that I think virtually every coach aspires to. Why? Like, how have you been able to do that? Because the knowledge is the same, right? It's clearly your implementation. What is it that's allowed you to distinguish yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. Thank you for all that. Makes me feel good.
It's the truth.
I owned a gym, a CrossFit gym, for 8 years. And so that definitely helped because I had a lot of practice of interacting with people in a manner of, caring about their bodies, and all that stuff. So for sure, that was a good starting place for me of that's one of the best things too about CrossFit gyms is you really get to know each other in the gym. Myself as a coach, I knew every single client's name in the gym, and I knew things about them. So I do that with my clients. Like, I get to know them. I understand what's going on in their life. It comes down to, it's not just you didn't hit your protein this week, so that's why nothing happened, getting to know them, being real with them too, like using my own stories, listening, asking those questions, and just letting them kind of just bleh, it all out.
It's amazing how that connection matters so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's been huge. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the most science-minded person. But I'm definitely live in the application, setting real life. Like, that is where I am very comfortable. Yeah. And, for the most part, that is where I even have some clients who I didn't quite think it was going to work out initially because they were very science-minded. I thought, oh no, this isn't going to be a very good fit. And I was already kind of thinking of who I might recommend them to instead. But here we are like 2 years later and they're still my client, so it can work.
And I think that in and of itself, just that level of humility and that lack of ego that you carry is also another reason for your success. And I think understanding where you're best, we gotta have a joke in our team that we all have different types of people and different types of clients. And I mean, you have a level of communication that you've been able to create through email. Because iN3 has an email program, and like the way that you connect there and the friendships that you've facilitated inside the email program are secondary to none. I know that for me, it's much harder to connect with somebody purely via email. I do love the phone calls, but you have done a fantastic job in that program. And I think that's the beauty of just having so many different ways of coaching. So before I let you go today, I have 2 more questions for you. First, I made mention earlier that you wrote a book. What is that book? Where can people find it? And where can people find you?
So the book is available on the iN3 site, or there's a link to it on my Instagram page at Brandy Wann. WANN is how I spell my last name. I'm sure they'll link it somewhere in the show notes. But so it's about reverse dieting. It's called Undo the Damage. And it's just, I started, you challenged me to write it. I started and you helped me with it, but I started on it beginning of last year. So it's been out for about a year now. And even what I already knew about reverse dieting just from doing it with my clients, I still learned a lot, even just from writing the book. So it's great. It's really written for anybody. Coaches can use it in their practice with their clients. Someone who doesn't really even know a whole lot about macros can use it, and it can teach them kind of how to get started and why, severely restricting calories isn't always the best option and the right answer. And I think all of, your books that you have and mine all together can just really build a good, foundation and answer a lot of questions that people have who maybe can't afford a coach themselves. And it's a good starting place, for that. But so it was, basically I wrote it for a lot of the information I could find about reverse dieting was talking about people who had done figure shows or bodybuilding competitions and how to come out of that, which I didn't fit into that. And, you told me I needed to reverse diet and we went through it. And a majority of I don't work with those types of clients. We have another coach very much qualified with those people, Amanda, and that is not my area of expertise. So, but the reverse diet is so applicable to most people. And so that's why I kind of wrote it with that premise in mind of this is how to do it, you know, for all the regular people who have tried all the diets with short-term success or no success. And now they're just so confused about what to do and they're frustrated, you know, and where should they go next? So this is kind of like the guide to kind of help you understand why this path is most likely the one that you should be on.
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned your Instagram handle in there too, at Brandy Wann. So yeah, and then obviously, guys, anyone that has questions for her through the iN3 site, they can just send them to our contact form. Okay, so final question. Obviously, this is the ALLiN Podcast. Everything we say at iN3 is we go all in. You've created a lot of success in your life. What is one thing that every single person needs to go all in on to create success?
Themselves. Like, you got to make that time for yourself. You got to learn to say no to things. I think that's a hard lesson for us all to learn. And there's nothing wrong with prioritizing yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you supposed to take care of your family, your loved ones, your pets, you know, do your job correctly? So invest in yourself.
Completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, again, I can't be more proud to wrap this podcast up and just more thankful for every ounce of value that you bring to so many people in this world, and just to being so impactful and influential in my life as well. So extremely grateful to have you on today. Extremely grateful for your time, and really just looking forward to continued success.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Guys, we'll talk to you next week.